Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining me today, and a massive thank you to the team at ABMA for asking me to present. So my name is Sarah, I work for Wild Welfare, and today I'm going to be talking to you about a behavioural management approach to improving animal welfare globally and how we at Wild Welfare have been working towards that for the past 10 years. So firstly, just a little bit about Wild Welfare, who we are and what we do. So our vision is a world where every captive wild animal is able to thrive and live a good life. And we achieve that in a number of different ways. We provide practical support to facilities that could be a zoo, an aquarium, a sanctuary, a rescue centre, anywhere like that. We work towards bringing welfare to the forefront of all decisions made. And that is really, really important for us because we know that welfare reform begins with those decision-making processes. We build positive and constructive relationships. We very much know that criticism isn't going to get us anywhere. So instead, we're very collaborative and we work with people rather than against them. We work on a significant range of resources, and some of those I will tell you about at the end of the talk. And we work towards long-term sustainable change, and again that's really important to us because there's a lot of changes that do need to be made which are very long-term, and we have to work towards making those changes or ensuring those changes continue long after we have left that country or that facility. And we provide workshops and training, both theoretical and practically, both virtually and in country. So we all know that there are some fantastic facilities out there which offer a great standard of animal welfare. But sadly, this is still the reality for many of the animals that we see in facilities around the world. And actually, Wild Welfare staff have taken 2 out of those 3 photos. So how can we utilise the idea of behavioural management to make sites like this a thing of the past? Let's start by looking at what behavioural management actually is. So it's defined as a comprehensive, proactive approach to enhancing the care and well-being of captive animals. And it works to address behavioural, social, psychological and physical needs. And it does that through incorporating the 4 elements that we can see here: enrichment, training, operational considerations and facility design. Now, enrichment and training regimes need to be strategised and goal-based, and that is really, really important. We can't just be doing them on a whim or when we think we've got a spare few minutes. Behavioural management really needs to be seen as a necessity and not just a luxury. And ultimately, addressing all of these concepts will lead to optimal rather than just adequate care. Now, we don't want to be essentially putting a band-aid over a bullet hole, going into a facility, adding in a couple of bits of enrichment, maybe just doing a little bit of training, and then leaving again isn't going to get us anywhere. It's not going to create those long-term sustainable changes that I was speaking about earlier. So creating an overall behavioural management strategy for husbandry practices is one of our primary goals to enact overall welfare reform. Now, we know that staff education is a big part of that because they are the ones who remain at the facility, and they are the ones that can enact the changes that we want to see if they feel upskilled and empowered enough to do so. Enacting welfare reform starts with the 5 domains model, which we've got here in a very simplified pictographic form. Now, historically, I'm sure many of us know that we used to use the 5 freedoms, which was freedom from hunger, freedom from thirst, freedom from pain, etc. And they were a great stepping stone towards this model put forth by Mellor that we use here today. And I love to show this as a demonstration of how quickly animal welfare as a science is changing and evolving and advancing. Because when I was at university, for example, we were taught the 5 freedoms because there wasn't actually anything else at the time more advanced than that. But now we know that we've got the 5 domains. Now, the main differences here is that the 5 freedoms looked at reducing negative experiences that an animal might experience, but the 5 domains goes a step further and looks into promoting positive experiences as well. And the 5 domains encompasses these 4 physical domains, which are environment, nutrition, behaviour and health, and how they all feed into this 5th domain of the mental state, or how the animal is feeling. And if we take this holistic approach to ensuring that all of these domains are considered, then we can really make a massive change to animal welfare overall. It's such an important concept to consider the comprehensive nature of behavioural management and not just focus on one particular element, for example, positive reinforcement training. So all aspects can be used flexibly and purposefully to implement husbandry changes. We can address behavioural problems, plan operational protocols, and develop strategies to enhance care and overall welfare. Now, what I'm going to show you next is how we at Wild Welfare have utilised that approach within many of our global projects. So this is the first of our case studies, starting with a bear park in Japan. So we at Wild Welfare, as well as Yorkshire Wildlife Park facility in the UK, have a collaborative partnership with this facility in Japan. Now the overall goal is to share information and provide support and training for the staff at the bear park, and that includes the use of accessible resources, which I'll go into a bit later on. So we work to teach and inspire staff to feel motivated in making environmental changes to the enclosures, which we know will benefit the bears, but we actually managed to take that a step further when the facility reached out to us for help. So they had 2 bears who were experiencing seizures, and they spoke to us and Yorkshire Wildlife Park in a very collaborative nature, and this was actually just as the COVID-19 pandemic hit, so this was all done virtually, and we were able to provide this virtual support at their request to talk them through protocols for training for conscious blood draws, using PRT, and creating this stress-free procedure for the bears, and actually upskilling the staff as well. And the information from the blood draws generated this discussion between all 3 teams, and the advice was given with a potential diagnosis as well. And the bears are now on a new diet with improved nutrition, and their condition is improving and being continually monitored. Now, moving on to an incredibly successful project which we initiated through our Partner for Animals programme in Thailand, and in conjunction with North Carolina Zoo. We conducted some enrichment training sessions at this facility in Thailand way back in 2019. And what you can see in the left photo is a new bed being built by the staff. And on the right, you can see this really great reaction from the sun bear, who, as soon as the bed was put into the enclosure, he climbed on it, he padded around, he had a little sleep in it, and the staff really benefited from watching him utilise their enrichment straight away. So the bear finally had somewhere comfortable to sleep off concrete, and the staff really enjoyed watching those interactions with their creation. Now, I bet that we all remember the first time an animal reacted really well to some enrichment that we've provided, and that kind of boosted our motivation to build some more enrichment and make even more changes to create those positive outcomes. And this was certainly the case for the staff in Thailand, because this was the start of something really, really big. We know that enrichment isn't a magical fix-all to the problems that we see, but it can form part of that longer-term strategic approach for overall improvements. Now, going back to that holistic approach, enrichment is one aspect of that. And in Thailand, they took the ideas that we shared with them in terms of enrichment and they totally ran with it. So fast forward to where we are in 2020, I frequently get sent about 300 photos every month to highlight all the enrichment activities that they have been taking part in. So the staff enthusiasm is really, really fantastic. They are identifying different behavioural goals for each species. So it might be foraging, it might be play, etc. And they're creating opportunities for that. They're using sensory-based enrichment, they're using audio-based sometimes, and food-based environment as well. Now, there are still some problems that we need to talk through. So, for example, they have sometimes been using unsafe materials, or there's a couple of occasions where they might have been spraying scents on browse, for example, which we know doesn't actually achieve anything. But in order to be effective, this is a long-term programme, and we are always information sharing and offering support as much as possible. And what's fantastic is that the team are really looking at what they can do for a range of different species in all sorts of taxonomic groups. So from nesting and foraging opportunities to birds, as you can see in the pictures, to giving private resting places and natural substrates for snakes, they really have listened to our training and gotten inspired to continue to roll out their enrichment programme even without us being physically present, which is fantastic to see. Now, moving on to a collaborative project that we work with in Sabah, putting elephant welfare at the forefront of management practices within a facility. So the work that we do includes assessments of existing enclosures for structural integrity and designing a plan to increase holding space for 2 off-exhibit bulls, and that will allow these 2 individuals to move freely off chains. Now we've also got a plan to install protected contact walls for safe training and better management, and with the training we're working to advance the level of practical experience for the care staff, and that has actually involved taking 2 of the staff in this facility, bringing them over to the Elephant Sanctuary in Tennessee, where they've got a very good PC management strategy in place, and being able to upskill those staff through that level of experience. And then for the elephants themselves, we're working to build on the elephants' repertoire of behaviours in this protected contact setting. And now moving on to a project very close to my heart, a facility that I used to work out in Vietnam had, amongst many other animals, a collection of sun and moon bears, and the enclosures that they were in were relatively limiting just in terms of space and utilisable furniture as well. So we wanted to make changes to address a few of these problems, and the first thing that we did was decide as a team what behaviours the bears would naturally undertake, and then thought through how to encourage those behaviours with new enclosure furniture, and this was true for the moon bears as well as the sun bears, and the sun bears got an actual completely revamped enclosure, and we did lots of log wall additions to the moon bears, as you can see in the photos there. Now, we knew that we could only utilise the space that we had in terms of the enclosure footprint. We couldn't expand it outwards, so instead, particularly for species that climb, we decided to move upwards. So in terms of the complete enclosure overhaul for the 2 sun bears that we had, we went from this, which was the initial enclosure, to this. Now, as you can see, the new structures offered the bears plenty of behaviourally diverse opportunities, from climbing to foraging to choosing where they want to rest and digging as well. So as well as benefiting the bears, the keepers were actually really proud of their new creation, and they actually had fewer behavioural problems to have to deal with in their daily keeping activities. So for example, there were fewer stereotypical behaviours present. We saw less aggression between the 2 individuals that lived in the enclosure as well, and it was really nice to see the keepers themselves really proud of something that they had designed, and they had actually built it themselves. They were fantastic builders once we managed to bring the materials in. And what was also fantastic was that higher management were really pleased with the public interest in this. So as you can see in this photo, lots and lots of people really eager to see these newly active bears displaying all these natural behaviours. So the higher management were very pleased with that outcome too. Another aspect of Wild Welfare's work is conducting welfare audits. Now, welfare audits provide a strategic way of prioritising improvements for a facility. It utilises that 5 domains model which we spoke about earlier to highlight areas which might need work to ensure optimal welfare standards. So not only do we conduct these audits ourselves upon invitation from the facility, but we also carry out in-country training to enable a network of available and properly trained auditors. We do this across parts of South America, Asia and beyond, and it really can strategise overall welfare reform. So if we think about the way in which we use behavioural management techniques, we can choose to be reactive to problems and use these techniques as a way to minimise welfare compromise, or instead we can use them to proactively ensure enhancements of welfare. And effectively, there's always a way that we can do better and push forward that progressive trajectory to ensure that welfare is improving and advancing all the time. Now, we've already identified continuing education for animal care and support staff as an essential component of effective behavioural management programmes. So here's some of the free resources which Wild Welfare have put together in order to progress that. And yes, these are all free. Accessibility is key for us, and that's why they're all free, but also why we're always translating them. Now, we've got our enrichment roadmap, for example, that is created in conjunction with Wild Enrichment, and that is now available in 10 different languages. Our Care for Us guides, depending on the species, are all available in different languages as well. And then we've got our e-learning program, which I'll talk to you about in a second. Now, not only do we want to be able to communicate important biological and behavioural information to animal care staff, but we also want to instill this sense of passion and enthusiasm to individuals and facilities to ensure that those long-term sustainable improvements and positive welfare changes continue to be made. So focusing in on our Wild About Welfare digital education programme, which is certainly our most significant resource to date. It is free to access. It's currently available in English, Japanese and Vietnamese, and we are working on more translations as we speak. It's also WASA endorsed as well, which is great. So there are 8 modules within the programme, and each of these modules have 2 complementary aspects. So you've got the learning element where you can read through specific topics related to that module itself, and then there's we've got like an interactive element which takes the form of kind of like a quiz, and you can take that at the end of each of the modules to test your knowledge retention, and also go through some kind of applied aspects to see how you could apply some of this information to your daily keeping practices. And these applied elements of learning, we wanted to bring in these because we know that they're very important. So we brought them in through questions, practical exercises and problem-based learning. And these are reinforcing what had been learned through the practical application in scenario-based activities, which can then be applied to daily husbandry practices, and that should equate to a better standard of welfare. And these can be used holistically as part of that behavioural management programme as well. Since launch, the programme's been used in over 60 countries. I think we're up to 63 now, which is great, and it has had over 14,000 downloads. We're actually fast approaching 15,000, and that is across the world. But my favourite aspect is that it's been used in over 25 different academic bodies, conservation projects and zoological facilities, and that can range from zoos, safari parks, aquariums, rescue centres, all the way up to university curriculum, and it's also been used in some conservation projects as well. So there's lots of different elements to its usage, and from the feedback that we're getting, such as the quote that you can read here from Arslan, we are seeing husbandry changes being made as a result of the information within the learning programme. And this includes those 4 elements of behavioural management that we spoke about earlier: enrichment, training, operational considerations and facility design. So I just want to take a minute to say a massive big thank you to all of the donors listed here, without whom we wouldn't have been able to do any of the work that we do, or certainly continue to have an impact for animals around the world. So that does bring me to the end of my presentation, but thank you very much for listening, and again a big thanks to ABMA for inviting me to speak. And if anyone does have any questions or comments, then my email address is just there, and do feel free to get in touch.